Welcome to the Upshot. I'm Huntsville Mayor Tommy Battle. Our program this week will discuss the art of the deal, what we do in City Hall to recruit industry and new companies to come to Huntsville. You know, it's a team effort, and we work with multiple partners: the Chamber of Commerce, the State of Alabama, Huntsville Utilities, Redstone Arsenal, other regional governments, including Limestone and Madison counties, and our local schools, colleges, and universities all pitch in. In the past 5 years, we have added 15,000 new jobs and seen a $1.5 billion impact in capital investment. We're in the top 10 fastest growing cities in the Southeast, and we are the 35th fastest growing metro in the country. People often ask me how we are doing it. It's hard work, and as I've said, it takes a lot of teamwork. Joining me today is the city's lead economic recruiter, Urban Development Director, Shane Davis. Shane, you've been in on this from the very beginning. Everything from Cabela's to Polaris to Remington to GE Aviation. Take us through some of the process that we go through as we get requests for proposals. Talk to us about the site selector. Tell us how this process works.
Mayor, I think you said it best opening up. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of people involved. I think where we've had success is, when we get a request for proposal that's a proposal that goes out nationwide, probably 40 or 50 states, thousands of cities, and then they start paring it down, and you get excited when you get in the top 5 or top 3. But I think we do a very good job in taking that RFP and really looking at the nuances, looking at the details, and trying to glean some special things that are in there that some cities don't recognize. For instance, Remington, I know early on most people were submitting greenfield sites, and in reviewing that RFP, the capital investment said to be determined, and that kind of told us, or what we felt like was they needed to relocate very quickly, and an existing building would be kind of a lead project candidate.
And remember, a request for proposals is kind of our first starting block when we come in with a site selector. They send out the request for proposals, we respond to the site selector, and then they come in and visit. Tell us about your first visit. I think an economic development head of Limestone County brought the first one in with Remington, didn't they?
They did. Tom Hill with Limestone County, who we got a great partnership with, called me and said, hey, we're submitting a proposal for this project. And I asked, could I see the RFP, and he emailed it to me, and I started looking. He wanted us to partner on a greenfield site. And
a greenfield site is?
It's an undeveloped site. It's typically a cotton field or just a large piece of land that's raw and undeveloped.
Mm-hmm.
And after reviewing it, I called Tom back and I said, we may need to partner in another location. I think an existing building, may be a front runner for the project. And we did that. And once you submit your package, it's kind of a hurry up and wait. You drink through a fire hose, getting all the information about your community together and answering all the questions. And then, after a couple of weeks, you realize if you made the first cut, and if you make that first cut, naturally the first thing is non-disclosure agreements get signed, and the game really starts.
Now, the non-disclosure agreement says, a lot of people say, how do these things start up and how do they get started? And how come we hadn't heard anything about them? All of a sudden, boom, they hear an announcement, we've got 2,000 jobs coming with Remington. Tell us about the non-disclosure process.
It's probably the most critical piece when you're dealing with a Fortune 500 company and a national site selector. I tell our staff, our image and what we stand for is the best asset we have. And when we sign those non-disclosures, they mean something.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very important. They're very important to, especially if it's a relocation. They've got existing employees that they're trying to protect and keep business running and in operation. So they're the most critical thing we do very early on in a project.
Now, remember when Remington first came in, I think you met them over at the Greenfield site in Limestone County, and I think you probably asked them, said, would y'all be willing to look at a building? Tell us a little bit about what we used to call the Chrysler Electronics building where Remington eventually came to. We had talked to 2 or 3 different prospective companies who were coming in the area about using that building, hadn't we?
Yeah, we have. We knew the building very well. We actually, our Industrial Development Board had secured an option on it, so 2 previous projects, and it just fit perfectly for the RFP. And we had met in the field, and they said yes. We had probably about 30 minutes before they caught their flight, and I said, taking you back to the airport, can we just circle the building and just kind of get you a glimpse so you can see what you're looking at? And we did that, and very quickly we kind of rose to the top. I remember with Remington, the state of Alabama kind of got in late, I think, on that project, and they pretty much thought they knew where they were going. They had it down to about 8 sites in the country, and we said, really, if you'll give us, one site visit, we think we'll show you something we have to offer. So it just worked out.
And after, tell everybody how that process goes. We found our site selector. He came in, met with our economic development people. You met with them. You showed them a building. They said, hey, that building might work. And by the way, what will it cost us to get that building and everything? And then what happens next? What's our next step? Because I think once they looked at the building, we were one of 50 different communities looking at this project.
When a site selector comes in, sometimes the first visit, they may come with a company representative or they may not. Typically, a community doesn't even know the group or the team that comes that first couple of visits that there may be a company official in the room with you. There's no business cards exchanged except yours to them and nothing in return.
You don't know the company name as we're starting to work with them.
Absolutely not. A lot of times you will not find that out till you're probably in the final 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think the first time we met in Remington, they all gave us first names and we didn't know any last names, and we were all trying to track planes and seeing where they were going next, and trying to get some kind of information on to figure out who they were.
Well, and I remember when we got ready to announce a couple of those first names that we had been referring them to, wasn't even their real first name. So it's a very secret process, and we understand that. But I think one of the things we do very, very well is these companies, when they come in, you may be the 7th or 8th stop that day.
Yep.
In a corporate jet or a national carrier. You're going to get 45 minutes at best with those guys, and it better be the best 45 minutes of showcasing your city and what you have to offer that you can have, because that 45 minutes will turn if you get a second visit or a third visit and really get to roll your sleeves up and showcase your city. So it's
We've been very fortunate. Had 3 great successes in the past in the past year, and what is it? 4,300 jobs total once they get developed out and everything. In that 45 minutes, let everybody kind of know what's our spiel in that 45 minutes.
The 45 minutes, you showcase a lot. It's just not the quality of life in your city, which is a big key focus. It's logistics. It's not just the highway transportation and the money you're investing in that, but it's the ability of the rail. You're showcasing your airport. You're showcasing your K through 12, your junior college, foreign trade zones, and the intermodal facility. And then the last 15 or 20 minutes, you start really showcasing the site. And a lot of these projects, our first proposal, we'll have 5 or 6 sites throughout the city, a couple in North Huntsville, some out west, and some near the Jetplex. So, we try to give them a very variety, because we want that second visit. So, we don't just put one bullet in the gun to say this is the only site we have. So.
Yeah, and I always say that one of the most important things we also talk about is our cost of living.
Absolutely.
When we're 10% less than the national average, 33% less than somebody we're competing against on the east and west coast, your cost of labor is something very important. And I always send them the Boeing article where Boeing saved $100 million a year by moving their Center of Engineering Excellence here to Huntsville instead of keeping it out in Seattle. And it's because of the differential in wages, because our differential in costs are here. So, it's very important to A, to show an expertise in the workforce, B, to show that we have a lower cost of living, C, to show that we have a lower fixed cost here, so that their fixed costs here would be a lot less. But the final thing that really comes through is when you start talking about workforce and education.
Absolutely.
And to tell us some of the people that we deal with in the education field in that.
Well, you take a Remington or a Polaris or GE that's making $150 to $200 million capital investment. A company can't do that 2 or 3 times. I kind of say that they have to hit a home run every time they swing the bat. These site selectors and these companies, because that capital investment can, if you make the wrong decision, locate in the wrong community, you can bankrupt your company and be somebody that's growing at an exponential rate to have negative numbers very quickly. So, I think we do a great job of showing we've got a existing workforce, but you got to show that you can reproduce that workforce. So we've got that track record of working with all of our K through 12 school systems within the county and Limestone County, our tech schools that's within those high school systems, Calhoun and Drake, and then UAH and Alabama A&M, and our 4-year universities, working with AIDT with the state.
AIDT, explain AIDT to us.
AIDT is probably one of the best tools we have in our toolbox. It's Alabama Industrial Development Training. It's by state statute. We get to offer that free to a company willing to come anywhere in Alabama.
Ed Castile.
Ed Castile, one of our great partners and truly an icon in the Department of Commerce. If you think back to Mercedes and Hyundai and some of those lands. And what we do, we're able to walk into a company and say, if you locate here, we don't give you a canned training program that you will adapt to. We work with that company and they help write that program of how they want their employees trained. So not only do we get that first 2,000 people that walk into Remington trained and ready to go to work, that program is ongoing. So, if they have another 200 open, they go through that same program that we've worked in partnership, both locally, state level, and that company, to custom make a training standard operating procedure, if you will, to get a job there.
Yeah. When Polaris came, we sent them the article on the green car competition from the Huntsville City Schools, because there they were learning how to engineer, design, manufacture a green car which would be in competition. And the Polaris folks came back and said, "Boy, that's right in our sweet spot. That does exactly what we have to do with our ATVs." And we could show them that through the Huntsville City Schools and Madison County Schools and Madison City Schools and Limestone County Schools, we could provide them a workforce that was career ready to go to work, ready and already trained in some of that. We go through the site selector, and they come in, they look. With Remington, they said, "Hey, we have an interest in the building and everything." And then the site selector says, "Hey, it's time for final proposals." And everybody put in final proposals. And usually, I think in Remington's case, they got us down to five different sites that put in final proposal. Tell us a little bit about the final proposal and how we work to shape that final proposal.
I think when you get to that stage, you're final of three, or your best out of five that's left nationwide. You've got a winning site. From a logistics standpoint, you've checked that box. From probably an educational standpoint and workforce development, you've toted the mail enough that you're a finalist. One of these five sites are going to be a winner. So then it becomes down to the cost of doing business, and I think that's where we're very competitive. And there's statutory abatements. I know sometimes that can be a debate publicly of incentives, but they're allowable by Alabama Constitution. It's not something that the city of Huntsville offers. We sign off on it, but then it's become what's your capital plan? I think that's where it gets really focused on. When you get down to 3 or 5 left in the United States, you can put a blanket over those 5 cities. What really sets you apart, and I think it's your investment back in the quality of life. It's showing that long-term investment back in the community where they feel confident to make that $200 million investment, because they know that that's going to be a 20 to 30, 40 year investment for that company. So, things could be great in that city today, and that's the right one to choose. But, what's your history showing, what's your future showing that, 10 years from now, I feel confident that decision was still the correct one to make.
All right, before we get into really what the development agreement was, tell them the barbecue story.
So I tell the public the mayor is phenomenal at the closer. That's what I nickname the mayor. He's the closer. So, the mayor with your Healthy Huntsville really stresses for everybody to eat healthy, both in his administration and all his public employees. And the chamber follows that too. So, Remington, it came in, and of course, being an outdoors guy, I was excited once we found their name. I said, we got to have this. And we had catered in lunch that mostly you do. Like I said, you've got 45 minutes to an hour, and they're getting back on a plane and headed back to hear somebody else's best and final offer. And so Mayor comes running in, and we've got this grilled chicken and some broccoli and just real healthy salad and stuff. And the mayor said, "This is Alabama. This is Huntsville. We've got to feed on barbecue." So the mayor just gets up and leaves, and I'm like, where do you go? So he's gone about 20 minutes. And he comes back in. And he's got, 4 or 5 pans of ribs that had come fresh off a grill, and it's kind of funny. We break for lunch and say, let's go fix a plate and come back in the conference room, closed door, and it was the star of the show. And they said, we'd been on a plane, we've been to Texas, and we'd been to Tennessee and South Carolina and a lot of the southern states known for barbecue. And they said, nobody's fed us barbecue. So this is the first place we've actually got barbecue. So
Now, barbecue didn't finish out the deal, but barbecue added a little bit of flavor to the deal.
I think it just allowed everybody to let their hair down and kind of get to know each other personally. And that's what you try to do.
And when we started putting in that deal, you put in state incentives, which are statutory state incentives. You put in local incentives, which the local government puts in. The state of Alabama Commerce Department will say how much is the local putting in before they decide how much they're putting in. And we had something kind of unique in the Remington deal. We had 4 or 5 different communities pitching in to make the local incentive. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. You know, we knew what it was going to take. Like I said, when you get in that finalist, you kind of know what the winning ticket's going to look like just from your experience. And we knew we was going to have to offer the building at practically no cost. We knew others across the country were offering similar type deals, and to make it competitive and is not as strengthful on one community, being able to open up to Madison County and Limestone County and our partners with Morgan County and Athens, and just bring that unity together and say, let's all put this together as a package. It did 2 things. One, it lessened the load for all, but also it sent a very, very strong message of that corporate leadership at Remington to say, you know, you're the only people doing this. You know, when we see, 3 counties and 5 cities coming together to welcome us into a community, we know we found a home.
Our incentive to Remington is $12 million. $12 million for 2,000 jobs, paying $40,000 a year for the job. Probably an $800 million impact year in and year out once you get the multiplier effect and everything to the community. A lot of people will say you're giving $12 million to this corporate and you're taking away from somebody. You're taking away tax dollars and everything else. Do we have a choice? We're in competition. We're competing against Tennessee, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, 5 or 6 other places with Remington. If we didn't offer that incentive, do you think they would have landed here?
No, and something that I think sometimes on the news our citizens do not get to hear. They hear the numbers. Some of them are gaudy when you put the 20-year tax abatement on the non-educational property tax that is offered just about in all 50 states in the United States. So you've got to offer that to be competitive. But something that you very well know, Mayor, is every tax dollar we spend to bring a job to Huntsville is protected. Yeah. There's clauses in every development agreement we take to council that if certain gates are not met each year with capital investment and jobs, we're getting our money back. So it becomes a partnership of we want you, we're willing to offer this incentive, but you've got to uphold your end of the bargain. If you don't, then we want some of our taxpayer money back. And it's a lively debate nationwide. Yeah. But just from a foundational purpose for myself, when you as a city government, there's not a lot things you're charged with. I mean, once you provide those city services, police, fire protection, your garbage and your sewage, and you're providing those services to the community at a very high quality rate. The next thing I think you should be charged with as a government is to provide opportunity for your citizens. That upward mobility.
Job opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah. Services first, but then once you're doing that well, I think the other thing in government is to provide opportunity for those citizens.
Yeah. When we were talking to Remington came in and had the big package and $12 million, and a lot of people would say that you probably why do you give corporations that, and say they outlawed incentives in the whole United States. Congress came together and outlawed. My argument is that all those companies would end up in either Mexico or Canada. Sure, because they bid. It's a competition, and it's a competition that you want to win because you want to be able to make sure that you have jobs for your citizens. But one of the things that you and I talk about quite often is making sure that we get the most value out of that taxpayer's dollar, that we spend that taxpayer's dollars well, that we do have what we call clawbacks that are requirements that they hit certain milestones in employment and everything else, or else they have to pay us money back, and that we protect that taxpayer's dollar in that. to me, that seems like one of the things that is incumbent upon us to do it in every deal.
Absolutely, and that's a charter you've put in place for us to compete, and we don't waver from that. We've walked away from some projects that just said we just don't do that. So well, you're not a fit for Huntsville. Something we don't share, but we've got a return on investment, and we kind of have an idea of what we're willing. We think an investment by the city is worth per job, and what that is. I think that's some of our magic that other parts of the state or other states may not look at or know. We think we've got a good number there, and if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. I think for all the ones we get to announce, the public don't realize the ones that we walk away from, or we read, and it's just not a fit for our community. But we're always going to protect that taxpayer dollar.
I always use that number that we get 1 out of 7. That's about the number that we get right now, 1 out of 7. Now, that 1 out of 7 is much more than a lot of other communities who are getting none out of 7. So it's nice to have that feel. But we've been through, the site selector sends out the RFP. We put in the RFP. The people come to visit from the company. They come through. We feed them barbecue. They look at the sites here. They figure this site will work. We have workforce. We have everything else. Then we get down to the development agreement. Talk about the lawyers and working with the lawyers on a development agreement. Isn't that fun?
I feel like I could get an honorary law degree some days. They're very thick. I mean, I think the public, again, you only hear a few bullet points on the news or in the paper, but a development agreement has a lot of protections in it, and a lot of times you're having to lead, the city. Not only our local in-house counsel, our outside counsel, the company may have a couple, 3 outside counsels from a finance standpoint, from just a capital investment standpoint. So at any one time, once you've said we've tentatively got a letter of intent or an MOU, if we can get this
Memorandum of Understanding,
we've got a project. At this point, we still have not said anything publicly. And that's where the work really begins. It's typically very fast-paced, within 2 weeks, and you may be putting a 100-page document with 14 or 15 exhibits. So a lot of late-night reading, read and reread, as I say, and a lot of highlights and finding a compromise. Naturally, we push way to the right to protect us, and they want to pull it back to the left to protect them, and you find that happy medium compromise that we both can live with. We feel like we've done a good job protecting the citizens. They feel like they've done a good job. They can move forward with their project.
One of the interesting things that always happens when you get ready to start putting your development agreement together, and you get somebody that you're maybe ready to put in your final proposal with, is always around the holiday season, isn't it?
Yes.
I can remember, what was it, Christmas Eve of last year, we were talking to one of the landowners
Yes.
with Polaris, and talking to one of the landowners, making sure that we could tie down our end of the deal.
That's what makes it successful, Mayor, is the team willing to make sacrifices. I remember a couple years ago on Christmas Eve, going to my family dinner like at 10 o'clock and told my wife, I said, I got to be at work at 2. And you show up and everybody's there. Nobody says, I can't just do that. So I think that makes a difference. We're all in it to win it because we know they'll make a difference in our community.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've gotten our development agreement finally done after 15 lawyers, thousands and thousands of hours, and billable hours at that.
Yes, sir.
We've got our development agreement done, and now we're ready for the announcement. And do you remember with the Remington announcement that we did it at the chamber? We had the Remington announcement, and the state had already signed their agreement, but we were still negotiating our agreement as we were signing, as we were doing it. I think we finally finished and signed our documents for our development agreement at about 11:30, and I think at 1 o'clock we had the announcement. Does that sound about right?
It was, and I think it just goes to our citizens to understand. Once we draw a line in the sand of what we're willing to do. Just because you put pressure that we're going to announce, we don't waver. We're going to protect that taxpayer dollar, and we're going to get a good value for the jobs and the opportunity. And I do remember. I remember hanging up on a conference call, thinking we had everything together and had to be at the chamber within 15 minutes of going live to the world.
And after we get finished with this whole process, and we have the announcement that Remington's coming to Huntsville, and 2,000 jobs are coming, and everything else. That's when a lot of times the real work really starts, the work that we have agreed to in the agreement, the development
Absolutely.
agreement.
Absolutely.
Also, recruiting some of their management to come here. Talk to me a little bit about what we did in recruiting some of the Remington management, and this was in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce, and how we recruited them, and then what we had to do to make sure that our milestones were met.
You're right. You know, once everybody is shaking hands and went back to work, you know, there's things that you as a community agreed to get in place by X number of days or some time frame, whether that's a turn lane or a road extension or getting, you know, a utility upgrade. And as I said earlier in the show, you know, we're only as good as our last performance. So, you know, that site selector is a national site selector. He's going to bring the next Remington through somewhere in the country, and he's going to remember, you know, did Huntsville uphold exactly what they told my client, you know, a couple years ago. So we make sure that we're early. We've never been late, knock on a table. But, you know, it's just something that you got to do. You got to go the extra mile. For Remington, for instance, the relocations to me are always tougher than the expansions.
Yeah.
Because somebody's family's involved. You know, someone has, you know, it's been announced, it's now made Fox Business News or CNN, and now they know. And, you know, the next morning they're going, that general manager going, is that my job moving to Alabama? Well, yes, it is. So I think we do a really good job. For instance, we had some folks that were school teachers or you know, was in this trade or that trade that their spouse needed a job. So our chamber, working with the chamber in Madison County and ourselves of finding out what their attributes are and kind of leading, guiding them. If we can help them understand that, you know, once you get here, you're part of the Huntsville community. You know, this community helps each other, and we're going to help you get placement there because, you know, in this day and age, most households have two incomes coming in. And you know, when your job's getting relocated and that's what you've got to do, but you lose that income, is, you know, it's a lot of stress on a family. So I think we do a really good job of trying to find placement for those folks once we understand their background and what their educational, you know, and what their skill set is.
Swap around a little bit. The Polaris move, when Polaris moved here. Tell us about your helicopter ride and where you were what site you were trying to get them on and what site they liked.
I didn't know you was going to bring that up, Mayor, but it is. You know, typically most of our site visits, you know, we do a helicopter flyover of the site, and
we have 5 or 6 sites.
We had 5 or 6 sites. We'd flown the city. We typically do a quick tour of the city. We can do that, you know, in 10 or 15 minutes in the air versus 20 or 30 minutes in a plane, a car. And as I mentioned, you've typically got an hour, and you put them back on their plane, they leave. So we had flown North Huntsville, and we'd flown the Parkway and showed them, you know, Huntsville Hospital and the medical, just kind of showcasing our quality of life. I was very impressed. And
showed them 2 or 3 sites. Then you came out to the Greenbrier
so
site.
we come back to the Greenbrier exit, and the site selector had brought a project about a year prior that we'd finished second to a site she really loved. And that's a site that she had shown. And we didn't know that it was Polaris, but in talking to some other site selectors across the country, I knew Polaris was looking. And at the time, I had 3 people in the helicopter with me. All 3 of them wound up, one being the Vice President of Operations, the CFO, and the COO. At the time, I did not know that's who was in the plane. And so I knew if it was Polaris, again, being an avid hunter and ATV owner, going back to the RFP, it said, you know, we thought it may have been automotive. You know, it is full R&D and manufacturing. It had a test track. So
you showed them one site, which was a site that we liked before, and what did they do?
Well, Nigel, the helicopter pilot for TVA, I've got to know him over the years pretty well, and you know, through the day of flying, I thought, you know, this really could be Polaris. So you kind of make a change on the fly. You know, you do what it takes. You kind of read people through the meetings and just be willing to make a move. So
you showed them one site, and then they look over across the road and they see a big swamp over there, and they said, "Ooh, is that area with the swamp good?" And you said, "Of course, you can't use a swamp." And they said, "Oh no, on ATVs we can." And that's kind of when we knew who they were, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, we'd shown the east side of which we had submitted. The site that Polaris is on today, we had not put in an RFP. Didn't have an option on the property, and I told Nigel I knew that if it was them, they would need some mudding type area to test, and And I told him when we went up that west flank, I said, Nigel, I want you to get you really close to the ground. And they pointed out and they said, does that come with land? And it was some swamp area, and I said, yes, it does. And the guy said, that'd make a great R&D facility, and made a joke. I said, I don't know who you are or what you do, but I sure want to be part of it. And everybody kind of laughed, and it kind of took some attention out, and it was kind of funny. We land on the field across the street, and the site selector is going, it's a gorgeous piece of property across the street. She's pointing at this other site, and the Polaris guy said, no, we like this site to the west better. And,
Not many people like a swamp, and so
No.
we thought we had a pretty good deal with that one. When Polaris came in, we tied together Morgan County, Limestone County, Athens, Huntsville, a number of different people to make that work, and it was part of that team effort. Did you think that we would ever be able to pull together that big a team to make that work?
I think you should take some recognition for that. I think it's just grown into that. It's success breeds success. I think some of our smaller projects, we've brought in 6 or 7 years ago, where it was the City of Huntsville and the Industrial Development Board in Madison County, and then that grew into Huntsville and Madison County and IDB and Limestone County. And when that success starts, people want to be part of that. And then when you tell the story that we're all in it together. This is not a competition. We're not in direct competition with each other.
We're in partnership together.
Absolutely.
When we start talking to the companies and say, hey, we're in partnership together, your success is our success, and we want to make sure that you're successful, usually that makes their eyes gleam a little bit. We've had Remington, we've had Polaris, we've had GE Aviation, which was recently announced, which is kind of out at that Greenbrier interchange also. What was the key thing to GE Aviation?
I think with GE,
Long process. We worked 2 years on it.
two
didn't we?
two years.
Yeah.
That we were working that process way before Polaris showed up, and it's high tech manufacturing, very very high tech, state of the art, brand new technology that probably become a household name at some point a decade from now. It was important to have a very high quality workforce, one that that they could do research and development somewhere like Research Park, but then have a high quality skilled workforce that could take that research and development and put it into a product out the back door. So on that, the site had to be right logistically, and we have that. But then it's being able to mesh an engineer and a researcher and scientist
With advanced manufacturing.
with advanced manufacturing.
The interesting thing is this is the only place in the world that will produce ceramics matrix composites. The only place in the world that will put together that process and do it. And there's so many other applications that makes us a leader in the world technology, and it will bleed over to our aviation fields, our rocket fields that we have, and some of our companies work in that area. So all that will tie together to make good things happen. So we've had 3 great successes in advanced manufacturing over the past year. What's next?
I think when you first took office, we were coming kind of in the middle of the recession, and we started looking at our community, and we had a hole in it. When you look at household median incomes, you've got rocket scientists and bankers and attorneys and very good wages, and then kind of service area. And we wanted to focus on advanced manufacturing, kind of diversify our economy.
Sure.
And we've done a great job at that. I think the focus is getting back the next few years into what we're good at, what we're known for, and that's look back in Research Park and bring some more of that high tech research and development, and continue to fill these 15,000 jobs and show that we filled 15,000 advanced manufacturing jobs, and there's still a workforce here.
I think one of the things that we're going to have is we have momentum coming right now. We have momentum off of our advanced manufacturing work, and we'll have another couple announcements off of advanced manufacturing, but those will happen just off the natural momentum. I think our job right now is to shift strategies and pivot back to what did make us successful, just like what you said. It's the engineering, the technology, and all the sciences. Looks like if you're in agreement with me, I think we've got a good future.
We do. As you tell the team all the time, as long as we stay humble, and we don't feel like people are just going to come just because we're Huntsville. As you open the show up, hard work. We'll stay focused. We'll stay humble and continue to work hard.
Shane, thank you very much. Thank you for coming on the show today. Thank you for being the urban development leader of Huntsville, Alabama. He is beyond just being the urban development leader. He is also head of all of our building sciences area of the city of Huntsville, inspections and engineering and earth sciences and everything else. And thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Mayor. Very kind.
To each of you, we want to say thank you for joining us today. This is our program on Art of the Deal. I'm Mayor Tommy Battle. See you next time on Upshot.